part 24 of my Promaster conversion install of the swivel seat. Just to show you real quick how to take the seat off. Real simple. There's 6 bolts. There's 2 in the back, and there's these torque. I think 40mm torque in the front. There's 1 in the front. Slide the seat all the way forward, and you can access these 2. And the seat comes off with the slide, so you don't have to separate the slide from the seat. But there is, on this passenger side, there's like a lip here that it stays in. So to take it, once you've got the bolts loose, you actually have to slide it back, because the seat has like a little slide in here, a lever that kind of slides all the way back. So you got to push all the seat all the way back to flop it off. And you don't have to disconnect your seatbelt sensors yet, but just make sure you're careful not to crimp the wires or anything. If you don't want to leave your battery unhooked for a day or so. Just a quick tip: if you do disconnect your battery to the negative terminal on the Promasters, and then you can connect these. If you don't, you'll probably get a seatbelt sensor light after you reconnect them, and I believe only a dealer can shut that off, but that's only me guessing. So looking at the seat swivels, looking on the internet, and I've also seen a couple. I really don't like the action on them. They're really choppy. They're not smooth when the seat is rotating, and it's just, it's kind of cheap metal, real thin type of steel, and I just really wasn't happy about spending $400, $500 for one of these seat swivels. So I decided to come up with my own design and my own kit, so to speak. So I'm going to show you that right now, and I'm going to take you to the back here. My last video was my doors, and I only had half of them done, but as you can see, that's my door install. That's the other one, and up in that upper space goes a hot water heater. That's one of the last things that I have to do before I'm complete. Okay, talk about my swivel kit here. Just the overview of it real quick. You have 2-inch steel pipe, not galvanized but steel, and it's a 2-inch. If you could get a bigger one, 3-inch, 4 or 6-inch, I would go with that, but the hardware store near me only had the 2-inch steel pipe. And the 2 plates here are 1/8-inch steel. Where you can get this, you're probably going to have to go to a steel place to get this. And this is 1/8-inch. The bottom plate's 1/8 and the top's 1/8. And the steel, you're probably going to pay somewhere, and the dimensions of this, 17.5 going across, and 17 inches from back to front. This is the front, this is the back. To dial in these holes, you make sure you want to dial them in. Now remember, when you separate it, these 2 are going to be independent, and here's the action of it. See how smooth the action is? Let me see if I can show you that. See how smooth the action is on this plate, on this swivel. So to dial these in, remember, once you mount the seat, they're separated from the bottom. The bottom plate mounts into the bottom seat bracket, and the top plate is for the seat. And of course, you move it like this to offset so you can get the bolts through here. You can use cardboard, but I use the cardboard board. Cut it out 17.5 by 17, set it up in there, did some marks to try to dial these holes in, drill the hole through that, set it back up on the mount in the van, and try to dial these in as best as I could, so I'm not fighting with it trying to get the seat and the bracket mounted. So that's what I did in order to dial these in. So to the mount. So the steel is probably going to cost you, you can either have them cut it or you can cut it, and it's probably around $40 for the steel, maybe $50 depending upon where you go. I would look in the remnants. Usually a steel supply has remnants, and you can kind of dig through that and come close to the dimensions you're going to need. Once you do have it, if you got to buy a big plate, you can cut it with a grinder, a thin blade like this, and it will cut it. Takes you a little bit of time, but it's not too bad. However, I have a plasma cutter, so I can cut this, knock the dross off, and then get one of these pleated blades and polish up the edges and smooth them out. Okay, how I did the kit, just real quick to show you the bottom so you kind of know what I'm talking about. There's the bottom pipe flange, and it has bolts in it, and that weld you see is just kind of a tack weld that I used to make sure it didn't walk on me when I was drilling the holes. And this is the top screw flange. Now, I don't have an extra a piece like this to show you, but I do have the flange to show you. So this is what the flange looks like right there. Has the 4 holes, and I just put the bolt in to show you what I did. And if you can imagine, this is the bottom plate. So this will raise you up about 7/8 of an inch of the seat. And I know that's a concern for some of you that are real tall. But you can dial this down if you want. You can get it almost touching here, the 2 plates almost touching. Because remember, when you rotate this, when you're rotating, like if this is the front and you rotate, it's actually raising up a little bit every time. But remember, you're only turning 180 degrees. So, I mean, maybe you're going to be raised up maybe 1/8 of an inch, if that. Now, you can control the heights of the flange. Once again, let's say this is the bottom flange that I showed you that has the bolts in it, and this is the bottom plate. So if you can imagine, if you see these bolts here, the bolts there, and then you can see I have washers and a nut leaning against the bottom plate. So if you put let's say you want it flush, you want it a little less than flush, your plate like that, a little less, right? You obviously don't want to be in the way of the threads. Well, you can control the height by just grabbing a washer, putting another washer on there, and you can control the height of this. Obviously, you put a nut on here, which is going to secure the flange to your base. And then this is just a nipple, but you use a flange type. You don't use a straight nipple. This flange drops in here. Now, you have to cut holes, obviously. You got to cut a hole for the bottom one, which is going to be bigger than the top one because the top one is going to screw in here. And remember, the top one you need a flange here, not a nipple like this, but one with just a flange. So it just has the bottom part like that. It has a flange right here around this part. That's what this is. And you want to make sure, now I have a plasma cutter, so I can cut the hole out and then take a file and file it down and get this pretty close. You want to get it as close as you possibly can. And then, of course, on the back side of your plate, if I can show you, on the back side, you look down there, there's nuts and there's bolts right there, right? So the bolts go through the plate and you bolt that, and then the plate, I didn't rest them on the bolts, there's some clearance there. So remember, you got the plate here, and then you put a nut on there and nut here, and then this secures your bottom plate to this bottom flange. Then you want to dial it in as best as you can. You want to take your top plate, you cut your hole in your top plate, and then what I did is I set it in there and turned this tight, and then marked where the front of this was, because I wanted to know exactly when I rotated this, exactly where I was, how many threads deep I was. And when you start moving this a lot, you'll notice it becomes a little looser, especially when you weld it and you're starting to crimp down on it. It'll become looser. It'll even rotate beyond that point, but it doesn't really matter. It doesn't rotate that far beyond. Like, let's say your front door's over here, but your main concern is you want to make sure this thing is going to rotate to the back. Okay, so once you have this hole cut, and let's say you don't have a plasma cutter, you only have your grinder, you can cut it square like this and just drop that square piece out. You just want to make sure, because there's a flange, this is a flange, not like this nipple. It's not like that, right? Because this would drop all the way through. This won't. This is going to drop, so you want it cut tight. Now what I did is I took, to secure this in here, this is 5/8 rod. You don't have to use a steel rod. You can use anything you want. But what you want is you want to kind of make sure this is flush with the top of this flange. So this was 5/8 and this was almost exactly flush with this pipe flange. And the price on this pipe flange are kind of expensive. I think they're like 15 bucks a piece. For this bottom flange, like 15, 20 bucks, and then this top flange was 15 bucks. So once you have this in, then you want to tack. I tacked all the way around the corners of these. So I just kind of cut an angle on them, set them in here, put a little magnet, held them really tight, each one of these tight, and then did a spot weld going all the way around. So it's not moving. This bolt's not moving. It's dialed into exactly where I want it and oriented in space where I wanted it to turn. And then once I did that, then I came up and I just did a weld bead going right going across here to secure this nut. So when somebody's sitting on the seat or anything, it's not going to flex or anything like that or break. So once again, that's the seat swivel, just like that. And if you want to lock it in, some people say, well, how are you locking it in? Well, there's 100 different ways you can lock it in. I'm going to drill a little hole right through here that goes through both plates, drop a little pin. So you're sitting in the front seat, you just pull the pin. It could be on a chain, magnet, whatever, and then you just rotate. Or if you want to rotate further, that's almost rotating like you're looking out the door. So that's kind of an advantage to my kit here. So altogether, you're probably looking at, the steel, let's call it 50 bucks. Then call it $30 for your pipe fittings. So you're up to about $80, maybe $90. But other than the time involved, you're going to save, minimum a couple $100, maybe even $300. So that's my kit. And one person asked me actually, says, what about an accident? Well, an accident. Okay, if you guys ever seen any of those Chinese models you have, it's much thinner metal than this. And this pipe is 1/8 inch thick also. If this winds up breaking in an accident, you probably have bigger problems than your swivel breaking in an accident. So I'm sure this is going to hold up a lot better than any other type of Chinese model you're going to get out there. So I hope that gives you some ideas, tips and tricks. Please subscribe to my channel, stay healthy, and if you got any comments or anything or questions, feel free to, I'll show you this one more time, feel free to write me and ask me. So that's kind of just the overview of it, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.